So the question for tonight is, does a rising tide lift all boats? Well, of course it does, right? That's assuming you have a boat. It's assuming you have access to a boat. You know how to get a boat. If you do have a boat, the boat doesn't have holes in it, so it can withstand a storm. My story doing this work began in 2006. I returned from college, and I believe in my lifetime I had access to a boat that was strong enough to withstand a storm. And when I returned from college, me, my best friend, and my brother, we all had boats, and we understood that. We understood with a boat comes responsibility. Comes the responsibility to make sure that people who look like us, who grew up in the same circumstances, that might not have had access to boats, might have been in boats that capsized, just couldn't withstand the storm, that we would create a nonprofit known as Delaware Elite to provide boats to young black men in the city of Wilmington, and to make sure that those boats were strong enough to withstand the storm. About 5 years into running Delaware Elite, there's a young man named Stanley, and he suffered a home invasion. Him and his mother were shot. His mother died in his arms. So you have to understand that growing up in Wilmington as a young black man, your boat already has a hole in it. And if you grow up in a single parent household, that hole's a little bit bigger. And when you lose your mother due to a home invasion, that hole gets even bigger. And then the next year, when your best friend, who has been beside you this entire time, also gets murdered on the street of Wilmington. The hole is just too big for you to continue to throw water out of it or try to patch it up. And eventually you have to move to North Carolina so you can have some semblance of hope for your life. Where did Stanley live? Stanley lived in the neighborhood where I'm now doing all of this work, the Riverside Neighborhood. The Riverside Neighborhood consists of two neighborhoods essentially adjacent to each other in the Riverside Centers tract. The 11th Street Bridge and the Riverside Public Housing Community. A little bit of context about the Riverside Public Housing Community is that it was built for white veterans in the 50s returning from World War II. And in the 50s and 60s, 50% of the suburban homes were federally supported by mortgages. As a matter of fact, between the 30s and 60s, $120 billion subsidized these homes through mortgages, and 98% of those homes were made available to white families. As a result, 70% of the children in the Riverside Centers tract live in poverty. As a result, 87% of the households are led by single women. As a result also of the criminal justice system during the crack epidemic that locked up 1 in 4 African American males between the ages of 20 and 29, that also leads to 87% of the households being led by single women. So when we talk about does a rising tide lift all boats, does everyone have a boat? And can everyone's boat withstand a storm? So when I got the opportunity in 2016 to work in the Riverside neighborhood, to save a sinking ship at Kingswood Community Center, which had missed payroll, which was about to close its doors, I thought about Stanley. And I felt like I was compelled, I was convicted, I had a duty to do everything I can to, again, save this boat. And when I got there, I realized the best way to do that was to really turn around our child care program, because in this state, if you have a child care program and you have low-income students that go to that child care program, you get state subsidies that help you fund it. And that's a way we could have generated revenue. We have a 122 capacity childcare center, or early learning academy at Kingswood, and we had about 30 children enrolled. So I knew I could address that. But then I found out that the market rate for our childcare, Kingswood gets about 53% of that through childcare subsidies, which means that we are getting 50% of the resources we need in order to make sure that the education that our children in the most low-income neighborhood, the most impoverished neighborhood, 70% of our children live in poverty, the resources they need to be successful in life, to have the education as all those kids that were afforded the American dream living in suburban Delaware, your Hockessin and your Greenvilles. So we went to address the child care, and we were turning that around. And then I realized, well, because we have a child care program, there are licensing laws that come with that state that if you're 13 and older, you can't be in the same vicinity as 12 and under. So all these community centers in Wilmington face the same ordeal. We have to try to keep our doors open, so we have to address the 12 and under population, but what do we do with our 13 and up population? We literally and figuratively kick them out in the cold. So then we launched a project called The Warehouse, where we're addressing teens, a state-of-the-art teen center. And then I listened to my now board chair of Reach Riverside, Charlie McDowell, who says, we need to do more. We have to have a holistic approach if we really want to affect change, because he was the board chair at Eastside Charter School, a K-8 school, and was understanding that the needle wasn't really moving, but the education in the school, because we're not addressing the community. The community is the unit of change. So we launched Reach Riverside to focus on holistic, place-based model based upon purpose-built communities out of Atlanta, Georgia. High-quality mixed-income housing, cradle to college and career pipeline, community health and wellness. And as we launched the warehouse and we start to address the needs of the teens, we understand that we have been given a nickname Murdertown USA because we lead every single city in America per capita, twice that of Chicago, with violence amongst youth. And the CDC has declared it an epidemic. So we have that epidemic. We launched the warehouse. We launched Reach Riverside. Then we're faced with a pandemic, a global pandemic, where communities of color are being disproportionately hit. So what do? We step in, we provide relief. We raise $500,000 in a matter of months, distribute $285,000 to the community. Each family for 5 months received $250 per month. We provided access to COVID screening and testing. When we started the pandemic, we were at 21% positive test rate, moved it to 13% by the end of the year. We distributed 400 Chromebooks, 15,000 meals, 72 families we had sign up for the census. We moved our census count rate from less than 60% to over 84%. That's more than a $6 million return on federal funding to the state of Delaware. We did this for the Riverside public housing community. Again, the community where 87% of the households are being led by single women, which is a key indicator for high school dropout rates, teenage pregnancies, future generations ending in divorce. It's cyclical. Intergenerational poverty. That was 2020. Then 2021, the 11th Street Bridge community, adjacent to the Riverside public housing community, gets flooded. 6 to 8 feet of water at its height. People literally being saved by the boats that they should have. So we jump into action again. We spearhead an effort, have 22 agencies come to the warehouse to provide support, start a fundraiser, raise $750,000, distribute to each family affected $2,500 per family, $5,000 to the families in an apartment complex that was completely condemned. Because we understand that, we're trying to do a great revitalization. And in 5, 10, or 15 years, everybody agrees with this revitalization effort. But who's going to have access to it because they couldn't withstand the storm. So we have to provide relief. So how do we get access and really take advantage of this place-based approach of revitalization? We have to build recovery. We have to build resilience. So we launched an initiative called Empower. Economic mobility places ownership within everyone's reach. You have to understand that the Riverside Public Housing community has an annual income of less than $10,000. 11th Street Bridge community has an annual income of about $23,000. Who can withstand a storm with those annual incomes? So we have to build resiliency. So we crafted a program. We raised $3 million to invest annually $1 million into a public housing community that costs $15 million on an annual basis to be subsidized by the state of Delaware. And we put this program together. We're going to address health and wellness, financial literacy, economic stability, family support services. And when we start working with the families, and we want to do all these great programs, what do we hear? I'm drowning. I can't feed my family. The lights are cut off. I can't find a job because I have a record. How do you do place-based work and build communities? You have to do it from within. You have to do it with the community, for the community. So what I didn't tell you is that through all of this work, the community has been at the center of it. The warehouse, our co-chair is an 18-year-old who's been working with us for 3 years, who is now at Delaware State University on a full scholarship. When we announced we were doing this purpose-built community and we were holding a big press conference, the governor, the mayor, Newcastle County exec, everyone was there. The president of Purpose-Built flew up. I said, we're not doing it until the community is comfortable. So 5 days before we did the press conference, we brought the community in and said, this is what we plan to do, but we want you at the table. You're going to help us master plan this. You're going to visit neighborhoods with our master developer to see what is possible. You're going to help us build this because we have to do it with the community, for the community. The first couple of weeks I was at Kingswood, and I said, we have to focus on childcare. I found out that we were owed over $20,000 from our parents because they couldn't afford the $10 to $15 copay each week. So I told the parents, I brought them in and I said, we're not going to continue like this. We're raising expectations. We're raising expectations of you, but more importantly, we're raising expectations for ourselves. We're going to clean the slate, and we're going to start new. In the first 6 months, I only had 3 families in arrears, and we worked with those families to get them up to speed. The new Kingswood Community Center, my board chair for Kingswood Community Center is Ray Rhodes, who grew up in Kingswood, who was actually at Kingswood when Martin Luther King was assassinated, when they had shut down the streets because of the riots. He was there. We're doing it with the community, for the community. So we talked about relief, we talked about recovery, resilience, revitalization, and doing it with the community, for the community. January 16th, 1865. January 16th, 1865. It was promised to black slaves, freed black slaves in Georgia, South Carolina, Florida. They were going to distribute 400,000 acres. No more than 40 acres per freed black slave family, blacks in that community. President Andrew Johnson quickly rescinded that order. That 400,000 acres today would be worth $6.4 trillion. We need to restore the wealth in our community. Real estate strategy to obtain racial equity. Next year, I want to launch a project called the 40-Acre Project to restore the wealth to our community of Riverside, to acquire 40 acres and turn them into communal assets. Our community deserves better But when the black community has $1 trillion of gross national income and 2% stays in the black community, when the black dollar stays in the community for 6 hours, when the average black family has 1 to 6 cents of wealth per white family, that does not sit well with me, and it shouldn't sit well with anyone in this audience. We can do better, we have to do better, but it starts within. We have to empower our community to take back what is rightfully owed to our community members that look like me. And that's what we're doing in the Riverside Neighborhood. We're restoring that power. And that's how you build places and build it the right way with equity. Thank you.